Hi there, this is Solid Charonin from Solid Charonin Films, and welcome to part 10 of my Claude Chabrol series, and this episode is from 1971, and it's Juste Avant, nuit, or Just Before Nightfall in English. This is another one of the classic Chabrol, you know, that period from late 60s to early 70s where he was just making excellent film after excellent film. This stars a host of familiar faces from his earlier work, but mainly it stars Stéphane Audran and Michel Bouquet and Francois Perrier. Perrier is the detective in Le Samurai. He's in Jean Cocteau's Orphée. He's in Costa Gavras' Z. So he's a familiar face, but this is the first Chabrol he appears in. And strangely enough, the main husband and wife partnership in this film are called Helene and Charles, who, if you've been watching this series on Chabrol, pretty much all his main protagonists are called Charles and Helene. That's just like a running theme throughout his work. This has another wonderful Chabrol opening. If you think of the openings of This Man Must Die and La Bouche, this is another great opening. Michel Bouquet and a naked lady in an apartment on a bed are engaged in some form of slightly S&M kinky sex games. She's wanting him to punish her. She's wanting him to kill her. It's another great Chabrol opening, and we see him leaving the apartment, and she's draped on the bed. We don't know whether she's still alive or whether he has actually killed her. And then we follow Charles as he goes to this pub and he meets his friend Francois, who's an architect who designed his house, and they're neighbours, and they go back to their normal lives. Charles works in an advertising agency where there's suspicion on the accountant of cooking the books, and he goes back to his family, Stéphane Audran, and his children. They live a very kind of high life in this gorgeous kind of modern art decor house. And then we find out that Francois's wife Laura has had an accident. We don't hear much else about it, and then we follow Francois to the apartment that we recognise from the start of the film, and his wife Laura is the naked lady on the bed, and she's been murdered. So there's not really spoilers in this. There is maybe later in the film, which I won't really talk about. But pretty much Charles has killed her. The game has went a little bit too far and he strangled her. So he is somewhat upset about this. He can't sleep. He is tortured by the guilt. They go to the funeral. The landlady of the apartment that Laura was using to meet her lover or lovers keeps staring at him at the funeral. Helene notices this and asks him about it, but he claims that he's never seen her before. And the police kind of come and go. It's funny, it's a film about a murder and the kind of consequences and the guilt of that murder, but the police aren't really in it that much. It's not really about the police. It's more about how do you live with the guilt. But anyway, the housekeeper goes to Francois and says she recognises Charles, but Francois doesn't believe her because Charles is such a lovely family man and wouldn't have an affair or certainly wouldn't kill anybody. So this goes on, and back at the office the accountant has made off with the money, and again Charles's colleague, with his feelings towards this guy who's a crook, kind of parallels what's going on in Charles's head. It's a film that is very understated. I mean, I think it brings up the point of why Chabrol is so underappreciated as a filmmaker. And Just Before Nightfall is a perfect example. It's not showy. Most of his films are slow burns. You need a bit of patience to get kind of invested in the character. It's all about character with Chabrol. It's less about, you know, big set pieces like certain other directors. He is not as technically showy as perhaps other directors. And again, not to repeat myself time after time, but it's only his first two films that are available on Blu-ray. As far as I know, I think there's possibly a French set on Blu-ray, but I don't think it has English subtitles. And again, I should say this is from Volume 1 of the Arrows CLAUDE CHABROL collection, which I recommend, even though it is just DVD and some of the prints aren't brilliant. But I think that's why he is underrated, because he's not the showiest director in the world. His films aren't loud. And this is a perfect example. It's all about what's going on in Charles's head. Because things happen and he's overcome by the urge to confess, the urge to give himself up. But obviously how that will affect his family, how that will affect his kids, his mother who adores him, and what's kind of the price of justice. So I think I will actually go into spoilers, so I'll leave a warning in the description. So I'm going to go into spoilers because I kind of have to. I think they're not shocking revelations or anything, but you have been warned. From now on it's spoiler territory. So Charles just becomes overcome by the need to tell somebody, so he confesses to his wife Helene, who takes it not badly, considering, because he does say he didn't love her. It wasn't about love. It was about sadomasochism, essentially. He somehow needed the urge to be punished, and Laura made his life hell, but he still kept going back to her. So it wasn't actually about love. And Helene pretty much says, you don't have to confess to the police because it sounds like an accident. It was just a kind of a sex game that went too far. But this doesn't kind of satisfy him. Audran doesn't really have that much to do in the first half of the film because she's essentially just playing the happy housewife and the contented wife, even though they do sleep in separate beds. But then the second half of the film, she gives a much stronger performance and she's got more to do as she's desperately trying to keep her family together, and she's desperately trying to stop her husband confessing to the police. So Charles feels better because he's confessed his wife. He doesn't feel that he's alone with this burden. But that's not enough, so he then confesses to Francois, who again doesn't take it that badly. He says he doesn't have a need for revenge. Again, he says it's probably just an accident. He knows his wife had lovers, because they had a fairly, they had separate lives within their marriage. And again, this kind of just drives Charles a bit more mad, essentially, because he desperately wants to be punished, which kind of comes back to the whole sexual relationship with Laura in the first place. So his wife doesn't punish him. Francois doesn't punish him. So again, he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's just desperate to confess to the police. During this time, they've caught the accountant from the office, so they go to the police station to kind of identify that this is the man. So they find him, and of course Charles asks him why he did it, and the guy just says go to hell, so there's no kind of easy answer for that. So again, he's just compelled. He's confessed his wife, he's confessed his best friend, but it's still not enough. And I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to say how the film ends, but it's just, again, it's a slow burn, but again, it's beautifully acted. Michel Bouquet gives a really good performance. Audran is Audran, and Francois Perrier is fantastic, as he is in so many different and varied films. So I would highly recommend checking this one out. Again, it doesn't have flashy moments. It doesn't have, technical aspects that are just jaw-dropping. It's just a really good, quiet, underrated film, and it's kind of a film that really kind of sums up Chabrol as a director and maybe why he is so underrated. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you avoided the spoilers, and if you didn't, you really should have watched the film by now. It was made in 1971. And thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen Just Before Nightfall, and I look forward to seeing you for episode 11 of the CLAUDE CHABROL series. This is Solitude Rowan saying thank you very much for watching, and farewell.